In March of 1907, George Soper approached 37-year-old Mary Mallon at a Park Avenue brownstone, where she was employed as a cook. Soper demanded Mallon give him a bit of her blood, urine, and feces. Soper said it didn't take Mallon long to react to this suggestion. Mary seized a carving fork and advanced in Soper's direction. Soper was a sanitary engineer, investigating a typhoid outbreak at a home on Long Island where Mary Mallon had worked. Soper believed that Mary was an asymptomatic carrier of typhoid fever, and he was correct. Mary Mallon would forever be known as Typhoid Mary. As always, this episode of A Brief History contains graphic content, information on a highly contagious disease, and general unpleasantness. Viewer discretion is advised. Mary Mallon was born in 1869 in what is now Northern Ireland. In the early 1880s, Mary migrated to the United States and was known to find work as a cook for the rich families of the area. From 1900 to 1907, Mary worked as a cook for 7 different families in the New York area. At the beginning of her career in 1900, Mary was working for a family in Mamaroneck, New York. Within 2 weeks of Mary's employment, the family members developed typhoid fever. Typhoid fever is a bacterial infection due to a specific type of salmonella. Symptoms of typhoid fever can range from mild to severe and tend to show 6 to 30 days after exposure to the bacteria. Over the course of several days, patients may find a gradual onset of a high fever. This fever is typically accompanied by weakness, abdominal pain, constipation, headaches, and mild vomiting. Some people are known to develop a skin rash with rose-colored spots, and others may suffer from confusion. Symptoms can last for weeks or months. Others may carry the bacterium without being affected, but are still able to pass the disease on to others, much in the way of Typhoid Mary. Next, in 1901, Mary moved to Manhattan and took up another job as a cook for an affluent family in the area. Members of this family developed fevers and diarrhea, and subsequently the laundress died. Mary then left this post to work for a lawyer, and departed that job after 7 of the 8 family members of that household also fell ill. Despite the many people she had worked for and had become seriously ill in her wake, Mary was determined to press on as a cook. In the summer of 1906, Mary took another position as a cook in Oyster Bay, Long Island. Within just 2 weeks, 10 of the 11 members of the household were hospitalized with typhoid. Mary continued this pattern with 3 more households in the area. That same year, George Soper, a typhoid researcher and sanitary engineer, was hired by an affected family to investigate the strange typhoid outbreaks in Oyster Bay, Long Island. Soper wrote, "It was found that the family changed cooks on August 4th. This was about 3 weeks before the typhoid epidemic broke out. The new cook, Mallon, remained in the family for only a short time and left about 3 weeks after the outbreak occurred. Mallon was described as an Irish woman about 40 years of age, tall, heavy, single. She seemed to be in perfect health." Soper, try as he may, was unable to locate Mary for a while. Mary generally would leave a family mere weeks after an outbreak and would never leave a forwarding address. While Mary managed to evade Soper for some time, eventually he found her employed at a penthouse on Park Avenue during an active outbreak. 2 of the household members during this outbreak were hospitalized, and unfortunately, the daughter of the family died. Soper approached Mary regarding her employment at the households in question and her possible role in the typhoid outbreak. Mary denied her involvement in the spread of typhoid and insisted she was healthy, and rejected all of Soper's requests for blood, stool, and urine samples. Soper was forced to leave empty-handed, but refused to give up on stopping the spread of typhoid fever. Still convinced that Mary was the cause of the outbreaks, Soper spent time compiling a list of all of Mary's former employers and compared them to typhoid outbreaks, and the evidence was damning. 7 out of 8 families that had previously employed Mary had claimed that they contracted typhoid fever. Soper visited Mary a handful more times, but was unable to get her to comply with any of his requests for samples to confirm that Mary was an asymptomatic carrier of typhoid fever. After all, Mary was healthy. How could she have been the cause of any of this? After Soper's report to the Board of Health, the New York City health inspector determined that Mary Mallon was a carrier of typhoid fever, and she was taken in and held in isolation for 3 years at a clinic on North Brother Island. While imprisoned, Mary was forced to give stool and urine samples. Authorities even suggested to her that she should remove her gallbladder because they believed that the typhoid bacteria resided in the gallbladder. Mary Mallon refused. Mary absolutely did not believe that she carried the disease and was entirely unwilling to stop working as a cook. The story garnered so much media attention, and Mary was given her new name of Typhoid Mary. Eventually, the New York State Commissioner of Health decided that it was unnecessary for disease carriers to be held in isolation. Mary was given the option of being freed from the clinic, but she had one rule to follow. Mary could no longer find employment as a cook. Between Mary's poor hand-washing skills and the fact that despite her protests, she was a carrier of typhoid fever, ensured that any family she worked for would be at serious risk of contracting the disease from her. Mary begrudgingly agreed and was released from quarantine back to the mainland. Mary was unhappy when released from quarantine. She bounced from job to job as a laundress, which paid less than cooking. After a few years, Mary was finished and decided to change her name to Mary Brown, and against the orders of the New York State Commissioner of Health, she returned to her previous job as a cook. For 5 years, Mary jumped from family to family, leaving a wake of typhoid outbreaks everywhere she went. Soper was back on the case, but Mary knew she was being looked for and changed jobs frequently enough to evade detection. In 1915, things took a turn for the worse. Mary started a major outbreak of typhoid fever at Sloan Hospital for Women in New York City. In all, 25 people were infected with typhoid fever, and 2 died as a result. Mary fled, but was quickly found by police and she was arrested. Once in custody of the police, Mary was transported back to North Brother Island and placed in quarantine again. Despite the havoc, disease, and deaths she had been causing for nearly 2 decades, Mary was still adamant that she was perfectly healthy and not a carrier of the disease, and still refused to have her gallbladder removed. Mary Mallon was kept in quarantine for the remainder of her life at Riverside Hospital. Media, doctors, and nurses were instructed not even to take so much as a glass of water from Mary due to the potential for contamination. Years later, Mary was allowed to work in the laboratory on the island, washing bottles. After 28 years in quarantine, Mary died of pneumonia. A post-mortem found evidence of live typhoid bacteria in her gallbladder. Mary was cremated and her ashes were buried in the Bronx. In times like we're facing now, we can never be too careful. Asymptomatic carriers of many diseases don't know or don't believe that they are a disease carrier, thereby putting others at risk. Stay safe and healthy. Wash your hands frequently with soap and water. Practice social distancing, and follow your local laws regarding staying home during these tough times. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.